So this is an Aquahot. It's what's known as a hydronic heating system, and it's commonly found on big buses, motorhomes, or vehicles like this one. Today I got some maintenance to do on this. I'm going to bring you along. I'm going to share why this is such a unique and incredible system on RVs, but also what makes it so terrible at the same time. I'm going to share some tips and tricks that we've used to save thousands of dollars with this system, and basically just going to share with you the secrets of the Aquahot. So this here is an Aquahot 650D. This is one of the largest of these systems available, but they're all very similar. Aquahot, HydroHot, and there's really one other system, Aldi makes it, that's sort of similar, but you see it says here, hydronic heating system. What is it overall? A hydronic heating system is the heat for the vehicle, the RV. It heats the air, the water, and sometimes the engine of the RV, all in this singular unit. This is very similar to what is like a boiler in a house. Now, we're not making steam. A lot of times houses don't make steam either, but what this does is it heats a fluid. All these pipes right here are what we call transfer fluid pipes. So what it does is it has a big tank of fluid in there, and it heats that fluid, and then that transfer fluid transfers that heat in that fluid to whatever else you want to use it for. In the case of this, it transfers it to air inside the RV via these lines. Basically, little pumps pump that fluid through these lines up into registers inside the RV. In a house, this is going to be like baseboard heat. Right? You can see those baseboards alongside that just radiate heat up. In RVs that have this, these are like little registers. Actually, here's one right here. So this is a register that has a little electric fan in the back. So what happens is the fluid flows through this, and you can see in here, there's little radiator fins. This gets hot, and then the electric fan blows air through this to heat the air. The one in here is intended to heat the bays, heat the water tanks, the black tanks, make sure nothing freezes down here. What is so neat about this system is that we can turn each one of these on individually. So all these pipes are individual heating sections, and it allows us to heat very specific sections of the RV. These tend to be very quiet, and it is a lot of energy. So we can heat up one piece of the RV and save money on basically where we want the heat to go, or just have different temperatures in different rooms, which is a really neat thing. The other piece that this unit does is it heats our water. So we got a cold water line and a hot water line. And what happens is the water goes into this unit. It goes into a heat exchanger that's inside that big tank of fluid in there. And it makes that cold water hot. It transfers that fluid, that heat, once again from the transfer fluid, the boiler fluid, into the water. And then it spits out hot water. This unit can produce an unlimited amount of hot water, because when it's running and it's heating that transfer fluid, it actually can heat the transfer fluid faster than the heat is taken away by the water. And it basically is it's a heat battery is what it is. It stores heat in there, and it's a heat battery that then can be used for different things. Now, not all of these systems can do this, but the last thing this system can do is it can heat up the engine. This coach has a very large diesel engine, and ideally, when you start a diesel engine, it's better that it's above freezing if possible. It's just better for the engine. The systems are warmer, right? So it starts better. So these hoses right here run back to the engine in the coach, and we can flip a switch inside that takes the heat from this and runs it through the engine. This is actually coolant from the engine. So it just basically pumps that through the engine from this and heats the engine. So this is able to do 3 different functions. What's neat about this, though, is that it can actually reverse that engine heating function. So these lines, when the engine is running, can bring heat from the engine into this system, and it can heat that big amount of fluid inside there to for us to use for our hot water or the air in the coach. So if we're driving along and it's cold out, the heat from the engine basically gets pulled off. It's kind of like the heat going out the radiator, except it's going into our heat battery that then we can heat the air in the coach and the water with that heat that we've stored. So really cool concepts. And overall, I'll just say, I think it's the nicest heat in an RV. It's far more consistent than having a single furnace. It's quieter, and it also allows us to use multiple fuel sources. This is a diesel burner unit. So these are diesel lines, and this unit actually burns diesel to heat that fluid inside there. But it can also heat with electricity. There are electric lines that run in there that heat electric heating elements. There's 4,000 watts of electric heating elements. So if we're plugged into a 50 amp service, we can heat our fluid that can heat our water and our air via electric, all through this one system. And lastly, off the engine. So there's 3 heat sources that this thing can use, all in the same package, which is so incredibly cool. Overall, one of the most versatile heating systems and most comfortable that we've ever experienced in an RV. Again, Aquahot, HydroHot, very similar systems. The Aldi system isn't really designed for the big coaches as much, and you find those in like trailers and stuff, but it's still a fluid transfer system that actually pumps that fluid through different areas to heat it up, which is really cool. Now, I can rave all day about the amazing side of this, but it also has quite a few drawbacks. I'm going to start taking this thing apart because I've got some maintenance to do on it. We're going to show you high level what it takes to do some maintenance on this thing. This isn't going to be a maintenance video. There are lots of people out there who've already covered the details of the maintenance that you need to do on these systems. So I highly recommend going into those for the details, but I'm going to talk high level about what it takes and some of the challenges with this system. Let me start tearing it apart. All right, so now that I've got it all open, I'm going to walk you through kind of what's going on in here a little bit. But this is going to be a good opportunity and time to talk about what's not so great about the Aquahot units. The primary reason that they are terrible at the same time as being so great is that they are immensely complicated systems. And this complication makes them very expensive to repair. It makes them have problems more often. I've definitely had more problems with this unit than I've had with a traditional RV furnace. And the repairs, well, I've been able to figure them all out myself, are probably going to stump a lot of average users of these systems. So it's definitely the complexity and the cost. Now, up front, the cost of these is really, really high, and that's why a lot of times you only find them on the highest end RVs. But that should probably tell you something about kind of what the long-term operational costs of a system like this is going to be. Let me show you around the system a little bit, and then I'm going to show you a few things that I've done to save a lot of money with these systems. Okay, so this is the 650D back here. You see that is the basically boiler cap. This part back here is the tank. That is full of the transfer fluid and the water transfer heat circuit. Up here, we've got, this piece is a Webasto diesel boiler, or burner. This is, this takes diesel fuel through these 2 lines. It goes in and it forces air and a diesel mist into basically a hole inside the boiler piece, and it just shoots flame into this section and it heats up that fluid. Now, these can also be propane. You can have a propane unit here, and it's not diesel, but propane, but same thing. Just ejecting air comes up through that tube there, goes in, and then out. I can kind of come underneath here, and you can see there is the exhaust tube, that the exhaust goes out and over to the other side. Now, the other stuff that you see here are basically the tubes and the pumps that actually pump fluid. So this unit has to force the fluid in through these lines and up into the RV. So these different pumps you can see they're all different. We've got 1, 2 back there, 3, 4 pumps here. And they're all different because, well, they've been replaced over the years. This is the original pump. I don't think they use that one anymore. This is the pump they're currently using. And this is something that I put in. We'll talk about that in a second. So then inside there is the water. So we got water in here and it goes into the system. And you can see there is some nastiness and a little bit of wetness down here. And the reason for that is we've got a tiny leak. So not only is this system complicated, but it's also got a fluid in here. All right, I had to turn the camera off because the neighbor was coming over. The second I turn it off, of course, all the exciting stuff happens. The next piece I was going to talk about was the biggest challenge with this thing is the fluid. It both is what's so great about it and what is so awful about it. We had a little bit of a leak in here, and see that? This is what the pump's supposed to look like. I was wiggling the pump around and it snapped off and the fluid just starts pouring out all over me. One definite reason when you're working on these systems, make sure to cool them down before you work on it because that fluid could be scalding hot. Now, luckily I had cooled it down so it didn't burn me. But I was going to recommend that you can use these inexpensive little pumps instead of the actual pumps Aqhahot recommends. It's just a pump. It's a 12-volt pump. Get a little brushless DC pump, and then you can use adapters to put them on and hook them up to the hoses. This pump's been in for a year and a half and it's been fine, but I think I over tightened it when I put it on there and that's what caused it to crack. This new pump has a stronger thing connection on here. Unfortunately, there's the stuff stuck in the original one. I'm still gonna go ahead and use this. This is like a $20 pump. The pumps that they recommend we use were like $400. So this pump at the bottom, I was gonna replace that one as well, but I'm just gonna have to use the pump I was gonna use for that one in the original position. If you're gonna be replacing pumps, you can use these clamps to clamp off the pipe. This isn't anything special, it's just a clamp. I just squeeze the tube to keep the fluid from flowing out. Now, the fluid itself, they recommend, well, okay, so Aquahot doesn't actually recommend you change the fluid. It says it's good for life. Now, that's...
A whole bunch just leaked out.
Yeah, so that is kind of a thing, but I don't really recommend that you just ignore the fluid altogether. What you need to do with these systems is you need to get this. This is called a portable refractometer. And what you do is you use a little pipette right here. You use a little pipette and you take some of the fluid that's inside it, and you want to do this like once a year when you do some service. I'm going to just kind of shove this into the boiler and I'm going to get a little bit of fluid. Here's another thing. A lot of people say like, oh, it's brown, you know, it's bad. Doesn't mean it's bad necessarily. What it means is that it's been in there for a while and the heat has degraded the color. But what we do is we put a little bit on this refractometer that has been calibrated to distilled water. We first put distilled water on this thing and you put this over it and you see that it fills it up. You want it to basically completely cover it. There we go. No bubbles in the system. And then you look through this thing and I can see what percentage of the solids, basically the propylene glycol in the system versus distilled water. And I can just see really quickly that this is at a 44%, -10 degrees. So we're a little bit diluted in here. It makes sense. We've been leaking a little bit. Over time, typically you boil off or the water kind of evaporates out of the solution. Using one of these, again, like a $20 instrument, you can figure out where your propylene glycol is, and if you need to change the concentrations, or if it's really, really off or really, really gross, then you might need to flush it out. Now, see if you can see in here. Let's see if we can look through here. Let's see. There we go. So you can see that blue line right there that is showing the refraction of the fluid. All right, high level, what is refraction? Basically, light is going in, and as light goes between different mediums, it changes speed. It's a principle you might remember from your physics classes called Snell's law. And when it changes speed, there is a refraction constant that says what it should bend at, and as you have different solids inside the water, it changes the refraction of the fluid of the light. It bends differently, and you can see where basically how much solids are in there and what it's going to change to the freezing point of the solution. So really, really cool. Highly recommend. Well, actually, you basically need to have one of these to keep one of these systems maintained properly. Now back to the fluid. We're a little bit low on our tank. If you get too low, the system will actually shut off. It'll have low fluid. I used just a little camera to look down inside the tank and actually see how low we are. We probably need a couple gallons of propylene glycol. We've lost it through this little emergency here and whatnot. Now, you can't just use any old propylene glycol in these systems. You got to use this really expensive boiler fluid. Now, this stuff can be, it usually runs about $40 to $50 a gallon. So we're very expensive, and this whole thing takes like, I mean, the 650D is a big one. I think there's like 12 gallons in there. I'm not 100% sure on that, but you do have to fill it with the boiler antifreeze. This has like a chart as to what your burst point is and what percentage. So 75% gets us a flow point of -50 and a burst point of -80. So you can mix this with distilled water, but because we're a little bit off from that refraction, I basically need to put pure of this stuff in. This is propylene glycol. It is non-toxic. It's very important that you use this stuff that's non-toxic in a system with the water transfer that actually heats our water as well, because if we ever had a water issue and this stuff got into our water supply, it'd be toxic if it was ethylene glycol. That's what's in your car's radiator and whatnot. This also needs to have inhibiting properties for corrosion, because this tank is a steel tank, and it needs to be filled with a fluid that is going to inhibit it from corroding. So very important you're using the right fluid. Do not put propylene glycol for winterizing a system like a water system in there. Yeah, it'll work, but it'll corrode the tank and you'll have a huge mess on your hands. So a next big savings thing for these whole systems is that they say yearly maintenance. You're supposed to top up that boiler fluid, and with the diesel burner, you're supposed to remove this whole thing, clean out the entire chamber, which I'm about to do on this system, and replace the diesel burner nozzle. Now, this isn't really that hard of a task. It's messy, it's dirty. Another drawback to these systems is that if you have a diesel leak, and they smell a little bit like diesel, so not really the best thing, but this is what the boiler burner looks like. It's got a little tiny filter thing. Diesel goes in this side and out this tiny little hole over here, and it turns it into a very, very fine mist that it then burns. It explodes, basically detonates. Doesn't detonate, that's the wrong term, but
ignites.
It ignites, there we go. Ignites inside the chamber and burns. They say to replace this every single year, and I'm going to tell you, you don't have to replace it every single year. If the system has not used the diesel side a whole lot, if it's been on electric and it doesn't have a whole lot of hours on the diesel, then you don't have to replace it. But if you have been using it on diesel, you're going to want to replace this about once a year. This is the very same thing that you're going to find on like home oil boiler systems. They don't even really make those anymore. But in the past, we had a house that used oil for heat, and I had to do basically the same exact maintenance. You can look up other videos of people doing this on their Aqhahot systems. Typically around like 500 hours of use is what you need to replace this at. If you don't know, if you have used it, yearly is perfectly fine for this maintenance. And once I get all this other stuff fixed, I'll be doing that as well. There is an hour meter on here to kind of tell you how many hours this burner has run. 2,545 hours on this particular boiler right here. Another piece to this whole thing is that this Aquahot system has lots of electronics, right? So this is the system that controls the boiler and all the safety pieces on the pumps. It controls the pumps running. It controls if there's something going wrong. But over here, there's another brain, basically. This brain right here. This is the brain that controls the burner itself. This is Aquahot, but it is actually a Webasto. It's Deutsch, it's German. And this has caused me headaches and problems as well. Again, a very expensive piece. This thing sells for around $600. This is the original analog version, and I had to open this up, hence the tape on here, pull it out, and I had to rebuild this thing myself. I've replaced all the capacitors and some of the transistors on the board in here. This thing is basically an analog computer. I actually made an entire video all about that, but then I realized that it was probably not really geared towards our audience, so I never put it together. So, you see these capacitors here? Capacitors tend to have a limited lifespan, particularly in high temperature applications. Now this thing is nearing 20 years old and it's been against a very hot boiler for a long time. So I'm guessing these capacitors' values have drifted. And these capacitors are used a lot for timing in this circuit. And they tell these transistors to basically fire the relays that then output to do things like ignite the boiler, etc. If these values are off, then it's not going to operate properly. So today, we're going to replace the capacitors on this board and start there. It's possible that some of these transistors are going bad too, and I've got those as well, but I think that's less likely. The capacitors are a dielectric component. They are similar to batteries, except on a tiny, tiny scale, and they hold very, very little power. But they're used to charge up or discharge and do different things in the circuit. And in timing circuits, which is primarily what's going on here, you could think of them like an egg timer with sand flowing through it, right? When you charge up the capacitor, you can do it one or two ways. You can charge it up, and as it charges up, the voltage eventually gets high enough that it trips one of these transistors to do something else. Or you can go the other way and have it drain down. Based on how this is, what the problems I'm seeing with it, that's what I think is going on. So I'm going to replace the capacitors on this today. But I went through and I replaced it, and I got this thing working again. Basically the boiler, the diesel side just wouldn't run properly. It would fire and then it would shut down, and is because some of the capacitors had drifted in here. While it works, it doesn't work for the long term, and I'm thinking of actually building my own digital version of this via a PLC to replace the system. If I do that, I'll have to write the code for it, and I'll share that for all the rest of you who have trouble with these dang Webasto boilers. I think that pretty much sums up my love-hate relationship with the AquaGo. I mean, it's been working, it's been doing its thing, and obviously I had a really big mess here when I just took it apart just now. And I gotta go through and fix it once again. This is probably the 5th time I've been in this thing in 2 years because of one thing or another. One thing on this boiler, I actually had to completely disassemble this boiler and replace all of the bearings inside it a couple years ago because they were making a racket, and then I had to replace all this with new sealant to increase or make the airflow proper. Just one more thing that I had to do with this unit. It's just so complicated. It's more challenging to work on. You've got to have a knack for figuring stuff out. There is really good information from Aquahot or HydroHot about how these systems work. Really good troubleshooting information if you're handy and can figure that out. Oh my gosh, dog, stop. So in summary, it really is a love-hate relationship with this thing. When it works, it is fantastic. It's the best, most versatile heating system, but it's also a constant repair. It's just been so much, and even the maintenance, like the yearly maintenance, it seems to come around so rapidly, and then you gotta get in here again. I'm going to link to an article that I've written about these systems and my saga recommendations. Again, I'm not going to cover how to do these specific maintenance tasks. That's been done by others in really good videos, and even Aquahot has provided really good information. But in the long term, boy, it can definitely be a challenge. So definitely something to consider if you're going to get a coach that has this, or you already have a coach that has this system. If you're not willing to dive into this yourself, you're going to spend a lot of money having other people work on this system for you, and it's probably going to leave you in the cold a few times. There's been more than one time where I've had to, like, wow, the furnace isn't working again, or something's not right, come out in the cold and fix something. So I'm gonna get back to fixing this thing once again. I really didn't anticipate to have this. I was gonna go through different things in this video, but I think that's kind of summed it up. So I hope this has helped you out, giving you an idea of what the Aqhahot system is. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up. As always, we hope to have you subscribe here and over on our website, mortonsonthemove.com. We share a newsletter with lots of information about RVing, everything from Aquahot systems to driving your RV and places to go. As always, I hope you stay safe out there. I'll see you down the road.